Today I'm joined by one of our clients, Eamonn, in County Limerick. Hello, Eamonn.
Good morning. Good morning, Tom.
How are you today?
Very well, thank you. Nice to talk with you.
So, Eamonn, what were the circumstances that led you to contact ALHomecare in the first place?
My dad, who at that point was 92 years of age, had been living in his home, but that became no longer tenable. So he came to live with me, and for the first while, he was quite mobile and able really to look after himself to a large extent. But then, unfortunately, he had a fall, and after a period of hospitalization and rehabilitation, when he came home, I realized, if I was to continue with my own work, I wouldn't be able to look after him adequately. And indeed, he needed more care than I could provide anyway. That's when I contacted ALHomecare. And very quickly, really, we found a very suitable person to come and live in my home and provide for his needs. Now, at this stage, he was still quite mobile with a walking frame. But, I needed somebody who would be there at any time, really, when he needed it. And I was living in the house myself, so that was a little bit different. I think in many instances, the care is on her own or his own with the client. But in my case, I was also in the house. But it freed me up to continue with my work, which sometimes was from home, but also at times was in the city.
What difference did it make to your relative and yourself to have a live-in care from ALHomecare?
Well, I think in the early stages, while he was still able to get around fairly comfortably himself, it was just an added assurance. It meant that his meals were taken care of, that I had still a certain level of independence to do my work and indeed to come and go and travel if I needed to or whatever. And he knew he was looked after and cared for. He had no difficulty with somebody providing that care. Before this, I mean, he was quite aged by the time this came around. He'd already been used to carers coming in occasionally for hours into his home. So, the transition was easy enough, really.
What advice would you give to a family who might be right now weighing up their options in terms of, care solutions for their elderly relative?
Yeah, I think first of all, I would include their elderly relative in the conversation from the word go. That it's not something that's been imposed upon them. But I think at the same time, people have to be realistic, and I think very often are realistic when they realise that kind of help is needed. I would interview the person myself, and in my case, I got somebody else to interview them as well for me, just to be doubly sure. As I say, it was an unusual circumstance, and they were coming to live in my home with me while taking care of my father. I would certainly realise that the carer is going to be there within the normal working hours that a week provides and allows for, but you do have to take care of the downtime, understandably the downtime for that carer yourself, or make alternative arrangements. So it's an overall care package you're putting together, and ALHomecare will play a very important and vital part in that. And then I would say, you just try to create as good a working relationship and professional arrangement as is possible. Good communication is always key. To be honest, we had no really serious challenges or difficulties. I had two different carers over the period of time that my dad was living with me.
And Eamonn, before we had this conversation, we were just chatting, and you told me that your dad took to the idea of a live-in care very well. So how did you bring up the topic with him, and what was his initial reaction?
To be honest, it wasn't an issue. As I say, he'd been used to people already coming in to providing certain needs. I think maybe very initially he said, do we really need this? But when I said, look, I need it if you don't need it, he accepted that very readily. I know it's not an easy conversation maybe in certain circumstances, but I think good communication, honest communication about what one can and cannot do is vital. And to be honest with you, I think people know more maybe than they're prepared to say about the realities of what they need in their daily lives by way of care.
What would you see are the advantages of live-in care over, say, a visiting care service?
Oh, well, I think the advantages obviously are effectively live-in care services. You've got one person, you can build up a good relationship. Very often the visitor services, the personnel changes around very, very quickly, very easily. That's one clear advantage. I suppose another advantage is that it's not quite 24/7, but as good as that can be, in that there's going to be somebody there most, if not all, of the time, and that's obviously much more secure for somebody like that. There's the companionship element of it. So I think there are many advantages, and also, of course, obviously, that this is all happening in one's own home.
Well, Eamonn, thank you so much for your time and talking about your experience of having a live-in care from ALHomecare.
You're welcome, Tom. All right, no bother.
Thank you, Eamonn.
God bless.